Okay. All right. So I am going to go ahead and just get us started here. My name's Michelle Parker. I'm the Vice President of Leadership for the 2nd District PTA. And we do these 411 meetings to try to help parents stay connected to each other, PTA leaders stay connected to each other, and provide information, help you perform your role at your school to help their school be successful. We do them once or twice a month now. We used to do them a lot more during the beginning of the pandemic. And so tonight we're doing this part 2 of PTAs and school site councils. And last week we had part 1, and we had some SFUSD staff join us to talk about what a school site council is and to talk about best practices in just running a school site council. And that video is available on the 2nd District PTA YouTube channel. There's also some slide decks that we have. If you didn't get a chance to see those, we sent them in our newsletter. We can share those with you later too. But today is part 2, and this is talking about partnerships between PTAs and school site councils, and frankly, any other group that is at your school as you're all working together to try to do whatever you need to do to support your students at your school. So I wanted to first to talk with you all about and hear from you what you think an effective partnerships is like, that you've maybe been a part of. And so I'm actually going to exit out of this for a second and share with you the link here. Because I want to have you get in here and do this Jamboard. Okay, I've just shared in the chat a link to this Jamboard. Have you all ever used a Jamboard before?
Yeah.
Okay. Rex, have you used a Jamboard?
No.
Okay.
I haven't.
So here's how you use it. Over here, my pointer here is pointing to a sticky note. So if you click on that, you can write here anything that you want to, and you push save, it'll turn into a sticky note on this page that you're looking at. And so if you all could just think about it, it doesn't have to be a PTA site council relationship, just any partnership you've had at work, at school, in any other part of your life. What to you makes an effective partnership? What are the characteristics of that? So you can go ahead and start, they'll show up on the screen because I'm sharing the screen right now. Put in whatever works for you, and you can do as many as you want. And we'll just do that for a couple of minutes and see what kinds of things we come up with. And you'll see you can make them bigger. You can do whatever you need to do. You can change the color as well. All right, anything else that you all want to add to this? Okay. All right, so the things we've got up here so far are around communication, trust and respect, willingness to consider other people's points of views, shared goals. And those are just a few. And so we're going to get into some other, get back into the slideshow here, into some of the other components of an effective partnership that we can transfer to our school site councils. So really important to remember is that great partnerships actually take work, right? They take a lot of intention and effort. They are not just something that happen because we wish them so. So that is that is the most important thing to remember. I think it's going to take some effort on everybody's part. So this is these are a few principles of effective partnerships. I'm gonna, let's see, move this down. Principles of effective partnerships. You can find lots of lists of what people will call, the essential characteristics. But these three seemed to me to be essential for the collaboration we have among different groups and partnerships at school sites. The first is communication. The second is shared goals. And the third is collaboration. We'll get into a lot more detail on these three areas with several examples in just a minute. And we'll start with communication. So this idea of communication, so it's exchanging ideas, thoughts, opinions, and knowledge. And the idea is that we want to make sure that whatever we're trying to communicate with the person we're communicating with is received well, right? That it's clear, that the purpose of what we're talking about is understood. And so here's a few things that feel essential in this, especially in the context of a PTA and a school site council: honesty, transparency, and respect. So the partnership between these groups, and I'm gonna also add in, because each school may have different groups. I know the groups here also have different groups at your school sites that may be involved in this conversation also, right? Especially if you're in a school that has different language pathways, you might have other groups related to that. If you have a very active African-American parent advisory group, you might have that, a special education advisory group. There's a lot of different advisories and affinity groups at our schools now. Our ELACs especially, those are happening at many, many schools across our district. So all of those groups. So honesty and transparency. What are the goals here? What are each of those groups bringing to as priorities? And can they be very clear about that? And to be as candid as possible while being respectful in what they need to share. Communication, and this doesn't always happen in our schools, but one thing that I think is important for a successful partnership is making sure that that communication is two-way, right? It's not just one person or one group pushing out information. It's finding a way to make sure that all of the partners who are communicating with each other are communicating with each other. It's not just receiving information or just pushing out information. Regular communication, and it helps in order to make it regular, not just thinking about it when you not doing it when you just think about it, but actually setting a schedule for that, whether that's meetings or email updates, whatever it is, making sure that the groups are regularly communicating with each other. Listening is really essential. Also, a lot of us like to bring our own points of view, and we want to make sure everybody hears our own point of view and what we want to have happen. But we'll also find that because we've got such diverse experience and diverse backgrounds and points of view, that we actually can learn a lot if we'll listen. And so making time to listen and stopping to think about what we want to say next in that interaction, it will help move the partnership forward. Some very practical things that we can do are providing scheduled updates in each other's meetings. For instance, if you're a PTA, you might invite your school site council chair to be on your regular agenda every single month at your general membership meeting, to provide an update. What's happening in the school site council right now? What did we talk about in our last meeting? What are we working on? What do we invite you all who are at this meeting to come and be a part of in the school site council? Perhaps the PTA is also inviting the ELAC to do the same thing, right? Provide updates. Maybe this chair of your English Learner Advisory Committee is going to come and provide updates about what they are talking about and working on in that committee, in case others are not able to go but really want to know. It can help increase the awareness of what's happening, what priorities are going on. And so the same thing could happen with a school site council meeting, is what are the other, especially the larger affinity groups, could they invite them to give an update so that there's awareness of what everyone's working on. I also would recommend having regular check-ins with the leadership of each group. back when I was a PTA president at an elementary school, we used to have regular meetings at least once a month with the principal, the school site council chair, and me as the PTA president. It was really, really helpful, especially when we were facing budget cuts from the district and other things, that we could start to coordinate about, okay, what are we hearing in this meeting that people really care about, making sure we're doing? What is the data telling us that we need to do for our students? And we would start to have some initial conversations about how we might structure our meetings, or what kinds of recommendations we would make to facilitate a conversation within those groups where the decisions were supposed to be made in collaboration. And so it felt nicer to not be surprised when we walked into a meeting. And, if we walk in and then the principal says, hey, can the PTA do this thing? We'd had a little bit of a heads up, and we're able to think about that and consider how the PTA could support some of the goals the site council was putting forward. So those check-ins were really useful. Frequency of that really depends on individual people and availability and schedules, but it's a really useful thing to be doing. Another thing to do is to be very specific and to set clear expectations. By that, I mean, let's say that you have a PTA, you've got a lot of parents in your PTA who are interested in bringing a specific program to your school. Making sure you're specific about what the PTA is wanting, and not just saying, oh, our PTA members want to be heard. We'll talk about what the PTA members are bringing up, or when you talk about what you have capacity to do, and being very clear about what that is, so that there's not an assumption on anyone's part about what might be happening. And that works in reverse for any of the groups that are involved in these kinds of collaborations. And this last one that I have listed is to create predictable systems. So what I mean by that is, well, let me talk about the reason why you want something that's a system that's predictable, is because that can start to build trust in your community when you have members of a community who know what will happen, when it will happen, and why, because you've set a routine around your communication channels, how you're going to communicate, when you're going to communicate. They know, maybe you have set a schedule for your whole year about here's our roadmap for our year and how we're going to accomplish things in our PTA and in our school site council. In the fall, or if you're in a school site council, we're going to start reviewing the school plan for student achievement that we created last year. We're going to bring some of the programs to come talk about progress. And late in the fall, we're going to review data. And then, in the beginning in the middle of the winter, maybe you're going to start holding some community input sessions to try to gather more information that will help shape your school plan for student achievement, your SIPSA, later. And so when the site council can build a schedule like that, and there's a system, we know what's going to happen throughout the year. We know the site council is going to communicate that through newsletters or through a call that the principal sends out to every family who they have contact information for. And then the PTA similarly says, okay, here's how we are going to communicate and how you can know what to expect from us. In the beginning of the fall, we'll be passing our budget that we will have talked about maybe during the summer or the end of the previous school year. And then we will be monitoring that. We're going to hold these different kinds of community events. We're going to hold these different kinds of fundraisers. And you set these systems up for when we're going to report out in each other's meetings, so that there's a lot of collaboration and transparency. When you start to build expectations and you start to make it predictable, then the folks in your community, the teachers, the students, the parents and caregivers, everyone starts to know what to expect, and they can start to monitor that. If that is going to, if there's follow through and people actually do what they say they're going to do, you're going to build trust in your community, and people will know how and when they can plug in, and they will know what's happening. So creating a predictable system is really important for building relationships that are trusting. And you need those if you're going to try to accomplish anything together as a community. Okay. So a couple of things that I wanted to just get in, focus on a little bit within this communication idea. Starting with the roles of a site council versus a PTA. Last week, we talked about what school site councils are and what they do and how they're supposed to work, what the law requires them to do. So the very high level of what a school site council is is it revises and updates the school's goals, the improvement strategies, and the expenditures that are in that school plan for student achievement. And those things need to be measurable and legally compliant. And then that school site council is also supposed to monitor implementation of those goals and strategies and their effectiveness. They are also supposed to seek input from advisories. And it is a requirement that, that this governance body is elected by the different peer groups. So the parents are elected by the parents, the educators and staff are elected by staff. And if there are students, then they are elected by students if you're at a secondary school. So that is a very, very high level overview of school site council's role in the school. A PTA, this first sentence talks about what a PTA's purpose is, right? So a PTA's purpose is making every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. So there's a lot of crossover in how these two groups will function, but they have slightly different purposes and different sort of legal responsibilities. The PTA often supplies a lot of volunteers. They might run programs and events, engage families, they might do fundraising, and they certainly and hopefully are leading advocacy efforts. The PTA leadership is also elected. It's elected by the members, and anyone at your school can be a member of a PTA. And in fact, in your community, not just at your school, anybody can be a member and vote. In the school site council, the only voting members are the elected members. And depending on which kind of school you're in, it's a different number. It can be up to like 10 people in secondary schools, but those are the only people who vote. But hopefully what they're voting on is informed by information they've gathered throughout the entire community throughout the year in the process of gathering that information, monitoring progress. So those are slightly different roles. PTAs are independent bodies. They are not run by the school, right? They're an independent 501c3 and their responsibility is to their members. Hopefully, lots of your school community is a member and anyone can be a member. Before I move on from this slide, are there any questions about those different roles? Okay. All right. So this is another thing that often comes up between school site councils and PTAs that I think is important to consider in this communication component of our partnerships, is being clear about how the funds work, between these two organizations. The school site council has purview over restricted federal funding. The school site council is required because of the Title I funding, right? That's the very specific funds that they are required to manage legally. But they also do consider all federal, state, and local funds as they're supporting SSCs goals. But the only one requirement that they have actual official decision-making power over is Title I. And then the PTA or PTSA has a purview over their PTA raised funds, and the decisions are made by the PTA members. And the one requirement with PTA funds is they have to serve all students. Sometimes that's indirectly because you're doing a targeted intervention that ends up positively affecting everybody in the school, even though it's directed at a group of students. Some kind of an intervention, but in general, they're supposed to serve all students. Now, knowing that these are two different sets of funds that these groups manage, hopefully through those communication suggestions that we talked about a couple slides ago, there's actually a lot of alignment in how funds need to be used, and you can just leverage the funds in the ways that work best. Right. So sometimes you have a PTA who's able to raise enough, they can help support a position or a program that the school site doesn't have funds to support. And if the two groups are working together in alignment, looking at data, looking to see what students at their school need, what families need at their school to be engaged, then hopefully they'll be on a similar page. And so it won't be controversial when the PTA says, we'd like to recommend that we fund this program, and it actually aligns with the goals that are laid out in the SSCs. The whole school community is on the same page because the communication's been really good throughout the process. So it's a way just to leverage the strength of the different groups and the funds of the different groups in order to best serve the students. There are many schools in our school district that do not raise that kind of money. And those schools, it's being able to leverage the volunteers and the programs that are run by volunteers that can also support students. That the site council is not in a position to do volunteer management, right? But a PTA might be in a better position to help manage volunteers to support different things that are needed. Maybe it's safety on the school curb as you're doing drop off, and the PTA can help run a stop, drop and go program so that no kids are hit by cars in the morning on the way, for drop off. Like that's a great thing for a PTA to run that can meet needs and concerns that a school community has, for instance. Okay. Are there any questions about that before I move on? Okay.
I do have a quick question.
Sure.
Okay, so a lot of PTSAs and ours have come up with questions regarding matching funds, restricted and unrestricted. We had two situations, and this is clarity for me. I hear it all the time. Sometimes it's get brain fog on it. Case in point, we made a parent made a contribution to the business academy at Lincoln High School. Okay, now it doesn't obviously benefit the entire school body because it's specifically for that elective of those students who are enrolled in the business academy. Okay, then the other one just recently, which we're still dealing with, is a parent is making a donation to the PTSA for the boys baseball team, but is holding the check provided she wants it's a she wants the PTSA to match that dollar amount. I don't know what the dollar amount is, so let's say it's $1,000. So she wants the PTSA to match it. Any this tell me any feedback from you on that.
Sure, I can give you a quick answer and then we can always talk offline to get more in detail with that. The first thing is that anything the PTA spends has to be a priority and voted on by the PTA members. If the priority of the PTA is to support athletics at the school and they're going to support all athletics at the school, okay, and then they can vote and then allocate funds accordingly so that all athletics, so that all students can be supported. But the PTA shouldn't only be supporting one sport. And then the other thing is that a PTA can't be a pass-through. So if the person just wants to get a tax write-off and they want to make a donation to the school and it's convenient to do through the PTA, they can't do that. If they'd like to donate it directly to the school, they can do that. And then the school can manage it because the school has a lot more flexibility in how they do that, but it's best for PTAs. They can't be pass-through organizations, and they do need to make sure they're supporting all students. So again, it could be maybe this PTA is deciding to support all athletics with some sort of like supplies grant or something like that. So does that helpful?
Well, the PTA, I'm sure that's like a easy lift when you put it out to the members that we're going to support all sports across the board, whether it's swimming or wrestling or whatever the case may be. But in this particular case, I'm sure the parent has a son on the baseball team. Else, I'm sure it's not a tax write-off thing. I'm just positive about that.
But so we have a member supported. So if the person just like, I want this to happen and I want it to go to the PTA so it can happen, and that's not a PTA priority.
So if it goes to the PTSA for the baseball team, can the members vote that's okay, or it can't be voted because the donor is restricting where it goes?
We have to be really careful with restricted donations. If the priority was already determined, if there was already a priority determined by the PTA members, and then funds became available to support that priority, that could be considered. But if somebody said, I want to give money to do this thing, and that wasn't a priority to the PTA, it's just like, oh, sure, we'll take the money. Then there's just you just have to be really careful about that because that can open a whole can of worms and practices that the PTA does not want to start managing a whole lot of restricted donations. You have to be really careful with that. But if it's been determined that it's a PTA priority because it serves all students for some, goal that you all have as a PTA, then you can certainly discuss that. It just can't be some one person determining what a school gets because they decided, that what a PTA is going to support because they have the money to make it happen. It needs to be a PTA membership decision that it's a priority.
Okay, I can I got it. I hear what you're saying. Yeah, between the lines, I can understand how we can make that work. It just basically it's a large sports net, and this particular one is going to hit a sport in that net called baseball. That's all. I get it. We
I
can
think
work it out
that's
without
a little
what,
bit more workable. Yeah. And I'm happy to
yeah.
connect you also with our second district PTA treasurer and others who have worked with a lot of these kinds of questions in detail to help you figure that out too.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'll hold you to it.
Yeah,
Thank you so
absolutely.
much.
Please do, Rex. Yeah. Okay.
So I think maybe a follow up on something you just said. So you
Sure.
mentioned you can donate to the PTA, but we want to avoid doing sort of restricted donations there.
Yeah.
But you then made a comment about donating directly to the school.
Mhm.
That's not something I've seen before, but I am new to this. How would that generally look? What would need to be set up?
I don't think it's terribly easy, but it can be done because the principals have trust accounts, right? And there's a line item, like there's a GL code, you know, our SACS code that that PTAs also will donate to. Like for instance, if a PTA was going to give funds to pay for a position, they have that. There's also the other thing, I think a lot of this has actually evolved over time too. And so I may not be able to give you the most up-to-date information on how it works, but if a person wanted to give money to a school to fund something specific and the school wants to manage it, they can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's something, again, if that's a situation that might be happening in your school, I'm happy to follow up and give you, okay. If it ever does, then reach out and we can help you figure it out. Okay, so the second component of effective partnerships is having shared goals. And so here I wanted to bring forward this idea of having mutual accountability and co-responsibility for the outcomes in your school community. So if you can identify, and of course, every organization is not going to have the exact same goals. You might have an ELAC that has very specific goals related to students who are English learners, and you might have maybe the PTA has some very specific goals around maybe the school drop-off safety, and maybe everybody cares about that, but they may have different priorities and things like that. However, likely all the groups, the school site council and all these other, affinity groups, including the PTA, will have some shared goals. So identify what those shared goals are. And one way to help get to those shared goals is to inform efforts with data. Right. So there's a lot of different types of data that your school has access to. It's the academic data from testing and different kinds of assessments. There's the school climate surveys. There's a lot of that. There's also other data that you all can gather out as a school. Sometimes school site councils will put out surveys to try to get other information about priorities in the school community. So whatever data you have access to, if you can educate and make everyone aware of what that data is and walk through and analyze it together to see what is the story this data is telling us, it might help people also develop some shared goals. Perhaps by doing that, you'll have a larger group of people who are identifying, we have this big disparity between certain subgroups of students. This seems problematic. And so they will identify that as something that the school needs to prioritize because we want to make sure we're supporting every student in our school. Then they can make that a priority as well, but they may not have known about that had we not created opportunities for them to review the data and interpret the data. So that is one way you can get towards shared goals, is creating those learning opportunities. Another way to find some shared goals is to focus on that, is to determine how to ensure that all voices are invited to contribute, right? So there's always a smaller group of people that show up to a site council meeting or a PTA meeting or an ELEC meeting, right? It's not all the parents or the caregivers or the teachers who are busy and maybe they leave school and they're not around for any of these kinds of meetings. How do you make sure that all voices are invited to contribute to goal setting? So it's not just a small group of people setting goals. And so you have to get creative about that. Sometimes it can be surveys, sometimes it could be little focus groups. It could be finding out what is the best way to reach different groups in our school. Maybe it's through, if you're in elementary school, Wednesday envelope type situation, or it's newsletters. However it is that you find you can reach people, is make sure that we're inviting all of the voices so that the goals are not representative of only a few people at the school. And And then the other thing, once you've determined what your goals are, is give everybody a role in determining how to meet those. So students, parents, caregivers, educators, administrators, support staff, community, all have different roles that they can play in reaching goals. And when we feel some ownership and responsibility towards reaching goals, we'll pay attention to them more. We'll help, when they're given a job. For instance, perhaps when we have parent-teacher conferences, in the fall, what if students are involved in those, right? So if we've decided as a school community, we're seeing that we'd like to increase some of our literacy skills for some of our students. So what if we started involving students in those parent-teacher conferences so that they're aware of what kinds of things they want to work on this year, and they're part of that, and they're leading that parent-teacher conference as a student and being part of their own education. What if that's doing some information and education sessions during a PTA meeting that helps parents know how to support their students' reading skills? They're learning how, what are effective way to do read alouds at home? What if that's learning how to find or how to use different strategies to help their student, or if they have a high school student, how they're helping with, different struggles that they're having. Again, that might be involving the student, and they're learning about how can a parent support at home. So PTA meetings are a great place to inform parents and answer questions that they may have in supporting their students, and giving them a role in, people feel much more empowered when they're given a role in helping to get to the desired outcome. Maybe there's professional learning that educators need to help reach that goal that they're not getting, and so reaching out to the district to find out how the educators can be trained. Maybe it's just helping people understand how to read data and to be looking at it regularly. There are a lot of different ways we can involve each member of our community to feel like they have a stake in what's happening, and that they can help contribute to the outcomes. So that's a great way to activate shared goals, is give roles in making that happen. One thing I wanted to let you all know about, if you don't know about this, is the National PTA many years ago now, I think probably 20 years ago, created these national standards for family school partnerships. They're really excellent. We actually don't refer to them often enough, even here in the 2nd District PTA. They're great standards that a lot of parent organizations and school districts all over the country have adopted or adapted in some way. And so these standards give schools guidance on how to improve family and school partnerships, and it sets the bar for best practices in these 6 specific areas: welcome all families, communicate effectively, support student success, speak up for every child, share power, and collaborate with community. And so when you look at an overview of this, which there's a link in the slide deck, which I'll send out after this is over, the overview of what these standards are include goals and also indicators for success, that you're actually meeting some of these standards to best support student success and well-being. So there's a lot more you can read about this to help enact these standards and achieve these standards in your own school. And so I wanted to focus during this shared goals section to talk for a minute about the 3rd one of these standards, which is called support student success, because that felt really relevant to this conversation tonight. And so this one, the standard is that the school builds the capacity of families and educators to continuously collaborate to support students' academic, social, and emotional learning. So there's a couple of goals underneath this standard that you can see is teaming up for student success. Are families, students, and educators on the same page about how students are progressing? Some of these things, the indicators that they list, are things that we talked about. And I'll point out this second one: provide an understandable and accurate picture of student progress, including multiple measures. So classwork, rubrics, observations, assessments, those are great things to be bringing into both site council and PTA meetings to help all of your community understand better what's happening with student progress. And this two-way communication is something also that we've mentioned. And then the second goal is around asking, are families valued partners in their children's learning? Do they have the respect, and are they invited into conversations in your school community? So that is something the school site council can invite families and caregivers into those conversations. The PTA can help bring them along also. So there's a great two-way opportunity. Again, that's sort of reporting back and forth between those different bodies. and contribute. Anyway, there's some lists here of some ways, some indicators that this might be happening at your school site. Again, the link for this will be in the slide deck, so you can learn a little bit more about how to bring those to your schools. But these are a few suggestions on achieving these goals around this standard. The third area is collaboration. And this one is, collaboration is how we're going to work together to get the job done. So we've already talked about effective communication and creating shared goals and key milestones. Perhaps we're trying to reach this milestone within our goal this year, or maybe it's a multi-year goal. And so what are our key milestones? And so moving on from that, create the learning opportunities, which I was just spending some time talking about. How can we help everyone in our community understand what we're trying to achieve for students and the ways that we might do that? Does that mean we might be bringing in somebody who's leading a program at our school, some kind of intervention that we might have in place to help everybody understand what that is? At a lot of secondary schools, we have AVID. So what if we did a program on AVID? So this is like first time. This is a great program for a lot of students who may not have the same support at home that others do. First time they might be the first person in their family who's going to go to college. So this AVID program is really great. So and it's shown, data shows that it's super effective at supporting students. So what if we have somebody come talk about AVID, help people understand how it works, talk about the data before students are in that program and after, and evaluate its effectiveness. You can name any one of many different programs that might be happening in our schools to support students. So let's learn about those. Let's bring a data expert from the school district to help us talk about how to analyze data and interpret it. The next, let me see, let me just look at my notes here. Actually, so I was in this webinar recently that was about family partnerships with schools, and just on that learning opportunity note again, I liked what they were hearing a lot of families saying recently as we're coming out of the pandemic, and that was, I need to be in the know so that I can be an asset to my child's learning. And I liked that idea that our families can be assets to their child's learning if we help them know the things they need to know so that they can be part of that part of doing that. Okay, so this next one I have listed is building psychological safety and trust. I don't know if this is a term that you all are familiar with or not. I'm going to have some links again in the notes of the slide here that you can read about it if you like. In general, psychological safety is the feeling and belief that you can share your thoughts, opinions, and ideas freely without fear of being degraded or shamed. There are some, there's 4 stages generally that are associated with building psychological safety. The first one is inclusion safety. This is where you satisfy this basic human need of connecting and belonging. So it's when you're in a space, maybe you're in a PTA meeting or a site council meeting, you feel safe and accepted to be who you are, quirky characteristics and all. You feel safe and accepted to be who you are. The next stage is learner safety. And in this stage, you feel safe to learn, ask questions, experiment, feel open to giving and receiving feedback. And you might even feel safe to make some mistakes while you're in this process. That feels like a really great stage to get to when you're trying to learn together and see what you're going to do next for students. And you don't want to be the one who feels stupid asking a question because you don't know enough, right? So if we create that kind of psychological safety, people feel safe to learn and ask and say if they don't know something. In stage 3 is contributor safety. This is when you finally feel safe to make a valuable contribution using your skills and gifts. And then the 4th stage is challenger safety. And that's the stage that involves feeling safe enough to challenge the status quo when you see an opportunity for change or improvement. So there'll be links for this if you feel like looking up some more of that, but that can be really helpful in building a trusting culture in your school and in these kinds of meetings, which all of us know sometimes get heated because people have very strong opinions about what they think their student or their classroom needs. And so when we can create an environment where people feel okay asking questions and they know that they won't be attacked for bringing a different point of view, that can really create a much richer space for us to work together. And there's also some suggestions in the links I'll share about how you might do that. And the key thing that I'll just note about that is leadership really matters. A lot of cultures within an organization are reflections of our leadership. And so making sure that the leadership is trained. And how might you do that? Well, when you're recruiting site council members, when you're recruiting PTA leaders, that's happening right now. You're saying one of the values we have is being an inclusive organization. We really want to make sure we're creating space to bring lots of ideas to our school. And when you set that expectation, when you're recruiting leaders, then you know that they're at least willing to learn, even if they are not great at doing it yet. It's a willingness they have to create that kind of an environment. There is a lot of intentional work that has to happen around creating those kinds of environments that are inclusive and create a sense of belonging. It could also involve things like collective norm setting, some educational sessions about inclusive practices. Some of those are available through SFUSD, and the PTA has done some of those as well. And also just practicing, working together and trying some things out. Related to that, this next one is to welcome all points of view and experiences, and also include and invite broadly. So if we want to have a collaborative environment between our site councils and our PTAs and our broader school beyond, we need to think about who's not showing up, who's not coming, and how can we go and invite them to bring their point of view and experiences and meet them where they are even, so that we have a very representative group and as many people as possible who are part of making decisions for our schools. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped this one. The implement decision-making frameworks and practices. So this actually links back to something else that I mentioned earlier around the systems, the predictable systems. It really helps for people to know how decisions are going to be made, but not just to happen in an unexpected way. So if they understand how the site council work and that it's site council members who vote, however, before that, there's going to be 2 community meetings where they are going to be able to give input. Here's how the input will be used. Here's how the decisions will happen. Or, in a PTA, a committee will be formed in order to explore this particular issue that we'd like to address, or to have this particular kind of event or activity. But then that recommendation will come to the PTA, and then the PTA will consider it, and everybody can make all kinds of comments, supporting it, opposing it, asking questions, whatever, before the full membership votes on it. And so when you make those decision-making practices very clear, then people know how they can plug in and influence and inform decision-making, and they know how they can be a part of it, because there are ways, at least there should be ways, for all of these groups to be including lots of points of views and perspectives into their decision-making. So make that as clear as possible so that people know how they can be a part of it. Moving down is gathering feedback. This is a great principle in really good collaboration is gathering feedback and being open to continual improvement and growth. So sometimes we ask for feedback, but we don't really want it. We just do it because we want to check a box. But if we're really open to hearing what folks have to say about what was good about a process or what they think is really working for their family, then that really opens us up to being able to continually improve. This next one is cultural humility. If this is not a term that you have heard, this is generally, it's a process of self-exploration and self-critique that's combined with a willingness to learn from others. It means that we enter a relationship with another person with the intention of honoring their beliefs, customs, and values. And it means acknowledging differences and accepting that person for who they are. I also have a few links in the notes of this slide that you can refer to if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that. This is really important because there's another term that's often been used, cultural competence. When we have all these different cultures and backgrounds of folks coming to our schools, there's no way someone is going to know everything about every single culture. It's impossible. And so there's been a transition to be using this term more often, cultural humility, recognizing that we have, it's an ongoing process of learning about where everyone is coming from, and knowing that we will honor what they are bringing to our group, and that we can learn from them, and that we're entering into a relationship with them. It also helps us when we approach this. it can help us recognize different power dynamics and imbalances and try to work to fix those when we're coming forward to a collaboration with humility in this way. And then the next one, this is probably something you all have heard about as well. Growth mindset. It's been certainly in education circles for several years, a lot, but even much longer than that. But in the last several years, it's been around a lot more. And this generally means that it's a term that we use to describe people who believe that their success depends on time and effort, that it's not just somebody's born with talent or not, and that's how they progress, but actually your success depends on time and effort. And people with this kind of a mindset feel that their skills and intelligence can be improved with effort and persistence. They embrace challenges, they persist through obstacles, they learn from criticism, and they seek out inspiration in other people's success. They believe they can get better at something by dedication of time, effort, and energy. And so we hope that our school site councils and our PTAs and the partnership formed between them has a growth mindset, that the people have a collective growth mindset on, if we keep working at this, we will get better. If we dedicate our time, if we try to learn, if we put effort into this, we will get really good at this partnership and we will get better at serving our students. So bringing that kind of a curious and growth mindset to our collaboration can be very useful. And then the last thing is sharing power. I think we're all aware of the various power dynamics that can exist within a school, administrators and teachers and parents, and the loud parents versus the parents who are not so loud and just a little quieter in what they're contributing, even though they may have a lot to say, how they feel comfortable. There's so many different power dynamics. And so within school leadership, are we finding ways, is the school leadership finding ways to share power with families? Are the PTA leaders finding ways to share power with the PTA members? And site council, same way. How are we finding ways to share power? Getting into collaboration a little bit more, I'm going to go back to some of these PTA standards for family school partnerships. The fourth standard is speaking up for every child, and that standard says that the school affirms family and school student expertise and advocacy so that all students are treated fairly and have access to relationships and opportunities that will support their success. This has two goals under it. It's navigating the school system. Are families knowledgeable? Are they able to raise questions or concerns? This goes to a little bit what I was talking about with psychological safety. How are we building trust? How are we making sure that parents feel comfortable asking questions, that they can contribute and they know that their contributions are valued? Making sure they understand how our school operates. That can be really complex for a lot of families, especially if they're new to this country. The second goal here is, does the PTA and school remove barriers for families to be advocates for and with students, particularly those who are most marginalized? So encouraging leadership. So how are we recruiting our leaders in our PTAs and school site councils? Are we making sure they're representative of our school communities? Are we looking at disaggregated data, not just full school data, but are we looking at the different subgroups within our schools and seeing how they're progressing and where we can make interventions to serve all of our students? Not just looking at them as a whole, and then looking at ways we can eliminate bias in the engagement practices we use in all of these spaces will help to reduce inequities in our school communities. And then the other one, this is the sixth standard for the family school partnerships, and that is share power, which I was referring to at the end of that collaboration slide. And that's that the school partners with families in decisions that affect children and families, and together as a team, inform, influence, and create policies, practices, and programs. So this is that partnership and decision making. Are we transparently and accessibly communicating about the processes? We just went into that. Are we building shared knowledge about how all this works? Are we giving them a voice in decisions that affect children? The second goal is, do families have a strong, broad-based organization that offers regular opportunities to develop relationships and raise concerns? So that can look a lot of different ways. we have PTAs. You all are here, you have PTAs at your school, but there are a lot of different ways to offer opportunities to families to raise concerns and develop relationships. Okay, so that was a lot of information that we just went over. I know you had a couple questions early on, but we're at the end of what I'm sharing out. So because we've got a small group, I just want to open it up. We won't go into breakout rooms as if we had a large group today, but What in this, when you're thinking about your site council and your PTA, what resonates with you so far that we've talked about? And what might you think about bringing back to your school? Is there anything that stands out to you?
I think the thing we've tried this year, still have some ways to go, is around better connecting the various parent groups. So the SSC was, inviting a member from all of like the PTA, the PSTC, PST, whatever the Japanese track sort of parent group was, Green Team and so forth, to come and talk, just to talk to each other more than anything. I think that's been a little hit and miss, just scheduling wise and all of that. On this is both a positive and a negative. On the sort of positive side, the people that are involved in these groups is actually a pretty small group of folks that have volunteered. So it's easier to connect and keep that conversation going. On the negative side, would certainly love to have more participation from parents across the school, and that's been, I think, our big struggle, is growing that back post COVID. It just is really hit the school hard as far as the volunteering and the parent participation in these programs or in these volunteer groups. So trying to build that back, I think, is our biggest struggle.
You know what? It's a struggle for every school. I mean, maybe not every single school, but there's so many schools I have heard that are dealing with that same struggle. And I don't know the answer for every school community, but one thing that seems it could be useful is, what's in those meetings, what feels of value, like what makes somebody want to attend something and be part of a conversation. Either they're going to have trust that what I have to say is going to be used and will actually change and make something happen in our school, right? It might be that trust that will happen, and that's something that takes time to build. But it also might be, well, I really, what do you want to learn about? Like, what do you want to understand better at the school? Or just as a parent, what do you want to understand better? Can we bring in a guest speaker? And so perhaps there's ways to provide programming at these meetings that provides value by asking folks what they actually want to learn about and hear. And then you just tack on the business to that. That's often been a way to actually get people to show up to a meeting. And sometimes that doesn't work because people are just busy. But I have seen that work sometimes in the past, but COVID has definitely disrupted everything. So
I can,
Yeah.
this is Rex. I can concur with Daniel. COVID really put a pause on Lincoln High School. Our fundraising took a hit because of COVID, as many schools have. And one of the things that we did this year, we shifted a lot of communication and focus on college preparation, PTSAs, SATs, admissions and stuff like that. And we have a whole dedication in our regular general meetings to discuss, checklists for 9th graders, 10th graders, 11th graders, the financial aid. And so that's a fan favorite now. People now come to expect to get something new. Here's 20 questions to ask on a college visit when you visit a school. Whether it's virtual or a school campus, because kids, they go to the, UC Berkeley tour of a college, early decision versus early action, all these things that we saw a uptick in interest. So we're using that as a pull. The one thing that is just a struggle, like what Daniel said, is you have core volunteers, you can count on them year in, year out. They're always going to be there, but it's such a small number. To try to get more engagement has been a struggle for board members or leadership, if you will. And then I'm also on the school site committee at Lincoln, so I'm on both PTSA and school site council, and I'm going to take it upon myself to bridge the gap. And I'm really disappointed tonight, kind of embarrassed, because I sent the link to both board members of our PTSA and our school site council to come to this because we need to be able to, work with each other and see how we can create better outcomes for our kids. So I'm going to shame them to death at next Wednesday's meeting. That you guys didn't show up, and I'm embarrassed and don't miss another one. But anyway,
no. Well, you can send them the recording and the slides, and hopefully it'll at least start a conversation.
Yeah, it's a struggle, but it's worth it because after COVID, we're all kind of like it was like calling a football penalty, and you have to go back 20 yards. And now we work our way back up the field. And every school is experiencing that. So I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think, one thing I'm wondering if this resonates, it's something that I've seen happen in the past. So many people get overwhelmed by the thought of being an officer or being on a school site council. It feels like a big job. And so, or even attending a meeting might feel like something big. And if we can find ways to have people do something in very small asks, and so if you have somebody, can you just lead this one agenda item, this discussion? Can you just lead this discussion? Or could you do this one thing for this activity that we're going to have at the school? Just one thing. Can you be there to welcome people in? When you give people very small, discrete jobs that are not ongoing black holes of volunteerism, sometimes it is a way to engage them and help them feel valued, but also just get them to come because there's a reason they have to come, because somebody's depending on them. And I wonder if that's something that you all have tried at your schools, just very small, discrete asks of help that aren't, the gigantic roles. If maybe those are places to start to expand those very small groups of core volunteers, which happen all the time at all of our schools. But I love, Rex, that you're talking about the programming that you're providing and that has been really successful at your meetings. Like that's great to hear. And I think everybody has to find their college and career prep, agenda item that everybody's excited because they want to know. And how can there's something about partnerships that also really matter. And that's the reciprocity. So it's not just, we need you to show up because we need to feel good about ourselves that you're here, but it's how can we provide value to you? So as we who are holding a meeting, we who are trying to get your input on something, we don't want to have you just come provide value to us by giving us your input, but how can we provide value to you? So that's a question that these various organizations, site councils, PTAs particularly, should ask. How do we provide?
You just gave me an idea. Thank you for saying that, but you just gave me an idea, and maybe we've done it, but I don't remember we've done it this year, or maybe I missed it. A survey to our members asking what they've liked and what they want to hear. We haven't done that, and I'm pretty sure I never miss a meeting, so I don't think we've done that. I think that would be great because everybody does surveys. You can't buy something from Skechers or AT&T without a survey. Everybody wants feedback, and it makes sense because I'm going to bring that up in our board meeting next week to actually create a survey. Because I saw our attendance drop because of COVID from, like we had 70 to 80 members at one time, and now we're like, 30 to 40. Yeah. And with, you always have a good new, at least with Lincoln, I'll speak for Lincoln, a good half of the new members always are ninth grade parents because their kids are now, and it's easy to keep a customer to try to replace one, if I can use that crude example. So I really want to hook and get the ninth grade parents in and to grow with us, because that's where you have your new leaders come in when people term out, and we need to replace officers like treasurer, secretary, president, that type of thing. Right. Well, thank you. You gave me that idea. Survey. Thank you.
Yeah. Find out how you can provide value to your members and to your school. What can you do to provide them value, not just take from them, right? The people who show up. Is there anything else in particular that you all want to mention that resonates, that feels like worth trying, or any other final thoughts you'd like to share?
No, I think it gave me some ideas. I definitely kind of go back to, my PTA partners and sort of share this. I think there's some good ideas of how to at least try and get a little bit more engagement with the family and caretakers group in the school. I think just if we can move the needle a bit on that, that will help a lot in what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, I think that we've just passed 8:30. And so we'll go ahead and close up. I'm actually going to stop the recording. And then maybe before you all even leave, I will share this slide deck with you so you have easy, quick access to it before I send it out.